What's up? What's up? What's up? You are listening to Data is My Science podcast, the show that makes data your passion. I am your host, Dapper Data. I have a very, very special guest on the line right now. I know you get a chance to see him right now, but wait till I introduce him. Wait till he gets the chance to talk about everything that he's doing. He's going to blow your mind. All right. And as you know, I've talked about artificial intelligence. I've talked about machine learning. I've talked about all that good stuff, right? At a high level, we dove deep into it, right? Supervised learning, unsupervised, all that good stuff. But we never talked about the challenges that AI brings and some of the critical problems that AI solves. We never really dove into that realm, right? And this is good for the novice and the beginner. Okay, as you know, my audience really takes hold of that novice, the beginner, the advanced, you name it, right? But this is good for all of those learners out there that are part of the Dapper Date audience and who's interested in what we have to talk about today. We're going to talk about coding, right? We're going to talk about AI. We're going to talk about the problems that it brings. We're going to talk about the important role of coding in AI as well. And also we're going to talk about a company called Cast.ai that special guest is going to talk about. So without further ado, I want to introduce you all to Leon Kuperman. Say hello, Leon.
Hey guys, hey Bobby, good to be with you.
How you doing, man? So
Good.
Leon is co-founder and CTO of Cast.ai, formerly vice president at security products OCI at Oracle, which is dear to my heart because I was there for probably the past 2 or 3 years. So we both share that interest. And Leon has 20 plus years of experience spanning across companies such as IBM, Truition, and hosted PCI. He also founded and served as the CTO of Zen Edge, acquired by Oracle. So today we're going to have a very interesting conversation. But first, I'm going to let you all listen to what Leon has to say. Leon, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Uh, Thank you, Bobby. Does everyone know your name is actually Bobby, or am I just like totally as a spoiler
Oh
alert?
yeah, yes,
Uh,
Bobby, Dapper Data, man. You know
okay,
they just freelance it, man.
all right, cool. So, what I'm a so you mentioned that job at Oracle. I'll tell you that's the first time in my almost in my whole professional career that I actually worked for a big company. It was real. So I've been a
Oh,
ser serial entrepreneur. I guess it's a cheesy slogan, but I've been doing startups for most of my life. And
mhm.
then I kind of entered corporate life through that acquisition. And I thought, oh my God, I was going to hate it. I was actually hiding out under the desk, like all, you know what it's like, Bobby, all the bureaucracy of
Yeah.
big companies. But you know what? It was a lot of fun in the end. And it turns out when you kind of loosen the reins and you kind of don't give a shit, then
Yeah.
you can have a lot more fun and get more things done when you don't have that kind of I don't want to lose my job over your head.
Hmm.
So that's a little bit about me. I'm sure we'll get into some detail.
Yeah. So you started a company. Well, first off, I want to go back real quick, right? Because you said that was your first big company. What made you say, look, out of all the companies, I want to go to a big company, right?
I never, I never. It was a necessary evil, right? When the big company buys your company, pays the money, you got to go. And
Oh, it was acquired, and then it was a sort of a transition, right, temporarily.
yeah,
But okay.
well, it started off as a transition. I thought, okay, like I was one of the only ones on my team that had an earnout, which means you have to stay for a certain number of years to get
Hmm.
paid properly.
Hmm.
Um, but started as a transition, but I ended up getting like they found me somehow, and I ended up getting a lot more responsibility. So I got an apartment in Seattle, and then the team grew like significantly. So I got instead of just the service that I came to the company with, I got many more services. Like all of the security services in OCI were being created from my team, including the future roadmap. And what was really cool is I got to actually pitch Larry Ellison on the roadmap,
Oh,
and
nice.
I didn't know what to think there. Like, oh, is he going to understand what I'm talking about? Is he going to? But he was so engaged. He had pre-read the presentation, and then he
Mhm.
was like helping me pitch the features to the rest of the audience. It was
Oh,
surreal. It was a surreal experience.
yeah, yeah, I bet, because the company is so big, as you already know. We probably have crossed paths during the time, right? Because you said, what was that, about 2020 or
I think I left in 2020. Yeah.
2020? Yeah, yeah. So we definitely probably crossed paths around that time. And, I mean, the company is huge, right? The government side, the commercial side, doesn't matter. It's just a huge company. And so you can only imagine the average person, right? probably 80% of people never get a chance to meet Larry Ellison. So
Yeah.
that has to be a awesome experience right there for
Yeah.
sure.
And if I had known you back then, I was so desperately looking for talented data science subject matter experts, like, because we had a lot of data science and data engineering work to do in security. I would have loved to have known you back then, but our paths didn't cross until now.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, look, right time, right? It doesn't matter, right? But so you started well, you're a CTO right now of a company called Cast.ai, right? That and I read a little bit about the company, but I want to hear more, right? I mean, this it seems like it's making a huge difference and has a possibility to make a huge difference in the world. What is Cast AI? What is its purpose? How is data really driving this vision?
Yeah, we have an interesting kind of intersection there as well, which I'll tell you about. I'm not even sure if you're aware of it, but I'll tell you about it in a second. So we had this premonition when we were building ZenEdge. We ran into all of these problems with our cloud bill. Like it was a disaster. Like product was great, everything was great, ended up turning out really well financially, but the cloud bill, the function of optimizing the cloud bill was so painful, and I would constantly get into arguments with my then CEO, who's my CEO at Cast as well, because it
Mhm.
was our kind of joint vision. That why couldn't we get this thing under control? And when we kind of finished that, I remember that pain point, and all good ideas are kind of born out of a necessity, born out of a need.
Mhm.
And I realized that I wasn't the only person in the world that has this problem with cloud cost, infrastructure costs. Everyone has this problem. And you're starting to see it now where everyone's looking to cut their bills. They're looking for where all of the inefficiencies are. I
Right.
bet you every single company on this planet today has an efficiency project to reduce their cloud spend. So, I, that's where the original idea came from. And then here's kind of the premise. The
Mhm.
premise and why we decided to focus in a very special area of cloud. We said we believe the world is going to move to containers, or is already partially fully moved to containers, right? So
Mhm.
if that's true, we need a container orchestration platform, and we believe that the clear winner is Kubernetes. All major cloud providers have a Kubernetes offering, and we
Right.
can, for those in the audience that don't know what Kubernetes is, we can dig in a little bit if you want.
Mhm.
And then if that's true, and we believe that in 5 to 7 years, all major enterprises will be on K8s or Kubernetes,
Mhm.
then there's not enough humans in the field. There's not enough engineering power to actually service these complex Kubernetes environments. So what if there was an autonomous platform that would manage Kubernetes for you, like a DevOps engineer, and
Mhm.
let those DevOps engineers go elevate their skill sets and do the more creative work that computers shouldn't be doing anyway.
Yeah.
So let's leave the monotonous stuff to AI or machine driven algorithms, and let engineers do the cool stuff. So that's where we got the idea. And we've only started to implement one leg of that journey, which is autonomous cost optimization. But we have many other legs of that journey that we still want to build, including disaster recovery, high availability of data, and cybersecurity. The vision is for a full autonomous platform on K8s.
So that's awesome, and it brings a question to me. At some point, we as a society, right? In technology, we decide to uh, uh, automate something, right? It's time to automate this thing, right? Whatever it is. And so, that whole DevOps process that's been going on for a certain amount of time, right? It's been going on for years, and you said at some point, you said, hey, look, it's time to automate it. Would you say that it's based off of the technology, when the technology is there, when it's ready to be automated, or would you say, hey, look, it still needs some time to develop, even with the technology being there, right? And then we need to automate after that.
Yeah, Bobby, you're right that the world has to be ready for that automation. And I can give you some examples where we've tried things where the world just wasn't ready for it. It's just too early. And being too early is just as bad as not being there at all, or being too late.
Right.
So you're right that the audience has to be receptive. And the audience, in this case, the DevOps engineer, is super receptive if two things are true. One, there's no jeopardy of him losing a job. Like anybody in DevOps understands that there's no danger of not having a job. And two, the tasks are so boring and menial, and the mistakes can pile up pretty quickly, that it makes sense for them to automate, and they wish they had that automation platform on their own.
No, that's awesome. And when you said that there's no danger of losing their job, I mean, that's probably everybody's fear, right? With technology these days, especially with automation. When you think about AI, I mean, I think I've had so many guests on this podcast. When I reached, I think around 40 or 50 at that moment, um, I probably received on average at least two questions per podcast that said, "Am I going to lose my job to AI?" Right? I mean, that's what their fear is, right? You know, even if you, it doesn't matter if you work at some high technology environment or if you work at McDonald's, right? Is it a robot that's going to be ahead of me? You know, is it going to be something that? I mean, what's your thoughts on that? Do you believe that at one point we will lose our jobs?
So, oh, by the way, did you see about a month ago, Chipotle announced that labor has gotten so expensive that they are now going to start implementing robotic processing for the Chipotle, counter assembly line. And
No,
maybe
oh my goodness.
so that McDonald example is a pretty good one. Do I think people? I'm going to share a link with you right now in chat. This is a
Hmm.
really good. There's an author who's an authority on AI. His name is Mark. I don't want to mess up his name. So Max Tegmark. If he's been doing a lot of work on AI responsibility and kind of
Hmm.
AI ethics.
Hmm.
The book is called Life 3.0, Being Human in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. And he talks about this exact same problem of, what's the next, in a general AI world, what's the next thing that gets automated out? And he talks about pretty sophisticated things like lawyers and accountants and things that you would think would be much further down the line of full
Hmm.
automation. And the truth is, yeah, probably some of these jobs go away. But is that really a problem for society? Our goal as humans is to continuously evolve and educate ourselves to be doing higher order thinking. We shouldn't be stuck doing the grunt work all of the time. And I understand that for some people that is a reasonable and respectful. Like there's no problem doing that work in the short term, but in the fullness of time, as society evolves, our children and our children's children, they need to evolve their educations to do higher order thinking. And so, yeah, we're going to get some automation, and it's not going to be pleasant in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to lead to massive productivity gain.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point, you know, and for me, I've always thought that when you're dealing with the machine, right? I just want to use one single word for this, you know, but when you're dealing with the machine, you should join it, right? You should not fight it, right? And there's going to be opportunities for you to learn new skills. I think that's where we're going, right? Where the new generation that's behind us, right? The ones that are like 15 years old, they're in high school or they're even in college, right? Or learning at an early age and they're trying to learn coding. Because I remember listening to one of your previous podcasts and you actually learned coding at an early age, right?
Yeah,
You know, and so
before before it
yeah,
was a thing, right?
yeah, before it was a thing, and so um, I think that that's the skills that people are going to learn in the future, right? You need to learn how to code or manipulate code or read code or whatever it is, right? You know, I think it's going to be really important for an individual. You know, my oldest son, he's 11 years old, and I have him in a Python coding course. I've had him in it for like 3 or 4 years, right? And at first he was whining and crying about it and stuff, but now he loves it, right? He's doing little small things like turtle and all this stuff, manipulating shapes and all that good stuff. And I think that, you know, as the machine begins to take over things like the line in Chipotle, right? You know, being able to do that, right? Somebody has to code it. Somebody has to program that behind it. And so that's where the jobs are going to be, right? It's not going to be maybe the service person in line, right? But somebody has to be behind the robot at some
Yeah.
point, you know.
So someone has to be in the factory that manufactures the machine, all of the components, all of the software to make all of those components, the software itself, the engineering behind predictive analysis of supply chain to make sure that the restaurant, like, there's so much work to be done. People shouldn't be worried about losing those frontline jobs. Like we just have to keep moving forward. And by the way, my son also, he's a little bit older. He's in third year engineering, environmental engineering, and he's doing a project with his prof, kind of internship where he's using Raspberry Pis and Arduinos
Oh, nice.
to create sensory. We did this together. I showed him the whole path where we're collecting the moisture information, the heat information, the weight information. We're streaming that all through the Pi to Google Cloud, where we're using Data Studio and BigQuery to visualize
Oh,
this for the audience. Like, and people are blown away. He didn't have much coding, like, just a little bit, but he learned it all in order to achieve the life science work that he wanted to achieve in the lab.
right, right, right. Well, let me take a pause. Can we both say right now that we are the reasons why our kids are going to be great? No.
I can't say that. I can't say that in all honesty. I think they're going to be great in spite of me.
I know. No, I'll just mess with you. All right.
Yeah.
So when we talk about coding, right? Coding is important. You say you learned it. How old did you start when you learned coding?
9. My first computer was an
Man.
Apple IIe.
Oh my goodness.
It
Oh
was
my.
before the Mac, so they had this DOS based 2 floppies. You would boot the machine with a floppy. It would boot up into a basic interpreter, and you
Mhm.
would have access to the disk, and you could write whatever you could write and load from disk. And it was literally a 5.25 inch. There was no hard drive on that machine. Fantastic! I love that thing. Programmed my first game on that computer.
Man, that's history right there because not too many people understand basic, right? When you said that, they're like, "What? Basic?" And then floppy disk, right? And they're like, "What? What's that?" But those are the things I think that foundational, education is important. I was in college and and they started me off at Java. Well, they had a class on Lisp, right? Basic. They had a class on I don't know, you name it. But even like regular C, right? Just basic C programming, and understanding all of that. I wish I had more of a background on that because that actually makes you a better developer. When you get into some of the stuff like Java, right? All the libraries is already built by like C and all that stuff. So you don't understand that there was this foundation that was built upon when you had to deal with garbage collection, right? And you had to actually, do some in-depth coding and understanding of the kernel and a lot more of a lot of the, you're not just programming and pulling modules in. It was difficult then, right? And if you're a person now that just has it easy, I think understanding that background is key. You know.
That's one of the things that I look for, like when I'm hiring engineers. I look for that deep, low level experience and
Mhm.
curiosity. More than anything, it's, you don't have to be there all the time, but are you curious? You get guys out of college that are just like, okay, I learned .NET, and
Right.
I'm not interested in going any lower. But like, have the curiosity to understand what's happening at the GPU level or at the CUDA level. Like, these are difficult
Mhm.
problems. I will tell you though, when I was in university, the thing that I really appreciated was we had a course on PDP-11, which was an early assembly language on
Yeah.
RISC microprocessors. We didn't even have those processors anymore. We had to use an emulator because the thing was so old. Like, we had our our Sun Spark stations, and we ran an emulator for PDP-11. We got to program low-level logic arrays, like
Mhm.
basically and or gates, physically manipulate them. And
Mhm.
that gave me a huge. And then in the operating system course, we had to learn how to build a file system and a memory manager and
Mhm.
all of those things that people kind of take for granted. So I 100% agree with you that low level curiosity is super important. Like, if you don't have it, there's some passion and spark missing. Like, sure, it's cool to code at the highest levels, but get down once in a while, get deep once in a while.
No, no, absolutely. And just when you mentioned CUDA libraries, we talked about this a little earlier beforehand, and you know, the average data scientist that I've met, they say, "Hey, look, all I care about is the software, right? All I care about is the data, right? All I care about is, just give me the platform, right? And I care only about that." And so then they're running these models, right? A lot of times, right? And I just ran into this with a customer when I was working with NetApp, and they said, "Hey, look, the performance is crazy, trash, right? But they did not understand how to dive deeper, right? So they say, hey, look, let me try to make my models better or something like that. So that's what they go to, right? That's the go to, but they never, if a data scientist could understand the connection between that software and that hardware, that would make them so much more efficient, I believe. Do you believe the same thing?
Yeah, one of my favorite interview questions for data scientists is, okay, so let's pretend we're training a neural network and I give you access to a GPU. Why do you think a GPU is so much more efficient at training a model versus a regular CPU? Man, if you don't understand the GPU architecture and the high propensity of thread counts, then you're just going to stop. Like, if you don't have that fundamental education, if you know how to use that black box model,
Mm-hmm.
you're just going to be missing a whole piece of why are we using GPUs? Like, probably a lot of people don't really understand why, right? And
Man,
it's
that's an awesome question. I don't think anybody, I've even talked about like, from an academia standpoint, right? They teach so much in data science, but they never talk about GPUs, right? They just start educating people on GPUs a lot more. And that's an interesting question, right? So if you're asking the developer or you're asking the data scientist, you're actually asking them about GPUs. Is
yeah,
that what? Oh,
yeah, and I'm
yeah.
asking them to kind of think through the problem of, okay, we have back propagation as the thing that we need to use. Like gradient descent is happening through back propagation. That requires a lot of parallelism. GPU is really good because there are 4, 5, 10,000 parallel, computing threads that are all dealing with floating point. That's the perfect thing to back propagate through a neural network.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's just like a fundamental thing that you would learn in theory at the beginning of your journey in data science. Some people skip right over that,
They skip over it, man.
yeah,
All the time, and it's amazing to me. And I would say, I guess, in my earlier years, that's something that I wasn't educated on because they actually do the same thing in academia, right? They really skip over that process. They have a short period of time and they're saying, hey, look, let's just teach you about coding, right? Or let's teach you about statistical analysis, right? Or categorical analysis or something like that. Let's just teach you focus in on some type of mathematical equations, right? But they skip past some of that part. Uh,
do you, Bobby? What recommendation do you make for people who are want to get into data science, machine learning as a kind of a first place to figure out if they love it or not? Do you have a go-to recommendation?
for me, um, I guess if I could take myself back to what made me uh, dive deeper into it. Um, if you love data science, or to figure out if you love it or not, I think that I would recommend um, the practical experience, right? Not the theory, more so than it's the practical, right? Jumping into it, trying out something basic, right? I mean, something that was exciting me as my first programming experience was that Hello World, right? That first
Yeah.
Hello World that you did was so exciting me because I got feedback from something that I didn't even understand. I was like, this is cool, right? And it was able to get me to the next level, right? And so I would say it's more about that practical experience. I've always said if you have both, you can be amazing, right? But you find more people either have the practical, they have the hands-on knowledge, or they have the theory. And so I always tell people to jump out there and get practical. Jump out there and actually try, something that is related to data science. And they have so many places in Kaggle. You can go in there and you can actually do it. You can copy every single thing from beginning to end, and you can get the same result. And if you get the same result, you start to understand it more. But it's exciting when you get that first experience of that practical experience. I always say, Diamond, what about you?
Yeah, you kind of took the Kaggle one. I would say Kaggle is a fantastic community, and
Mm-hmm.
people will share with you. Like, you will have the forums, like, so, we should put up the Kaggle website for those who don't know, but it's a competition website. Companies put up money. Like, I just saw one from American Express. The prize money was 100,000 USD, which ain't no joke. And
Yeah.
then and they give you the data set, and they tell you kind of rules of engagement, and then you can submit your solutions as many times as you want, and then the best solution wins the money. I think there's a first, second, and third prize. So, like, if you're getting started and you're not sure you're passionate about this, you got to see the crazy things that they're doing on Kaggle. And it's owned by Google now, but it's still maintained a lot of independence, and it's still a great community, right? The,
Yeah.
the the other recommendation that I make on the theoretical side is there's this professor at Coursera. I think he's actually a Coursera founder. His name's Andrew Ng, and he
Oh yeah.
has
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
uh, and he has this intro to ML course, which I took maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago now. It was right very beginning of like Coursera, and that really kind of opened my eyes. And he has a very calm and interesting way of expressing the ideas, all the way from basic linear algebra, which you go through, to linear regression, and then you go into support vector machines and many other, like, all the way through to neural networks. It's a
Mhm.
great foundational course. It takes about, I don't know, 12 weeks at your own pace. You submit
Mhm.
homework every week. Fantastic learning platform.
Yeah. Have you heard his talk on um, I don't even know the name of it, but basically he was talking about it's not about the models, right? Because when we're talking about performance of the result that you're trying to get, a lot of times we skip past data preparation, right? And
Yeah,
actually cleaning up the data. And that was like an hour and a half or so talk. And it was amazing to me because so many people were developers, right? We skip past that data preparation process. And the data preparation process is like key, right? Trying to clean the data because that's the decisions that you're actually going to come out with, the output and stuff, right?
yeah.
And the cleaner the data, the better the result.
Yeah,
So very well.
garbage in, yeah, garbage in, garbage out, right? Like, if you, and it's pruning the data, but also like spending the time on normalization, and like just making sure, because a lot of models won't work if your data is off scale. Like, if you've got one feature that's 0 to 1 million and another feature that's 0 to 10, if you don't take the time to regularize the data set, you're going to get crap performance, or you're going to get features that are way overweighted.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to take it a little bit back to some of the challenges that AI brings to the world, and get your thoughts on that because a lot of times we have a lot of people in the audience that are really trying to dive into this buzzword AI, right? It was right. It's not really a buzzword, but it's a hot topic, I guess, and they're trying to understand, well, what are the use cases? What are some of the great use cases that we can use out here, right? I know Cast.ai, you have a few use cases that you have developed along the way, but AI in general, just looking at um, some of the challenges that AI brings to the world, right? Like ethical challenges, issues with responsibility as well, right? Do you see some of that a lot going on right
Yeah, and like, I think I listen a lot to Elon Musk, who really tries to raise the red flag about like AI ethics, right? And the basic, you can sum it up by, if we are close to general AI, which is different than machine learning, or some localized models, like a machine that can uh, you can extrapolate machine learning to all kinds of creative problems. and it
Hmm.
can start to think for itself, then what is our responsibility to make sure that that machine does not get carried away and do bad things to us, right? So if we're not ready for that, if we haven't done the work, the hard work to figure out where the guardrails are, what the ethical implications are, then and here, let me give you a very concrete, down to earth example. If you
Hmm.
have two Teslas that are on autopilot and there's a car accident, right?
Hmm.
Who's maybe one of them was a human, one of them was a machine. Whose fault is that accident?
Yeah, yeah,
What if
yeah.
what if someone dies in that accident? Would it have been better if two humans were driving, like from a liability perspective? Or is the world generally safer if we have no drunk drivers and we have robots doing the driving for us, especially when in dangerous times? So the ethics are extremely complex. And I think the problem is that society is so short-sighted that no one is willing to take a long-term or long game approach to creating an ethical structure around general AI, which may be 20 years away or 120 years away. We don't know, but the time to start thinking about it is now.
Right, right. And then there's this thing like explainable AI, right? Too,
Great
right?
example.
Trying to understand you have a tool out there, right? The transparency is not there anymore, right? In the AI tool that's there, and being able to take that, what exactly is it doing? Is it doing what it's saying that it's supposed to do, right? The algorithm and stuff like that, and and those are the things that we have to think about, right? Computational speed is a lack of computational speed. That's another issue that I've found when I think about some of the issues with AI, right? When you're thinking about machine learning and deep learning solutions requiring like that high degree of computational speeds. That's what NVIDIA is trying to solve, right? Larger infrastructure requirements, you have pricing associated with the processors and all that good stuff. So there's so many different issues that I'm finding, with AI right now. What are some of the problems that AI is solving? Right. I mean, we talked about some of the issues, right? You have the ethical issues, right, with the neural networks and things like that, but I'm sure there's stuff out there, right? Like fraud prevention, and I want to ask, are we there yet? Are we truly there from an AI standpoint where we are solving these problems? Or are we still at that real machine learning phase?
Yeah. We should double click on that. You brought up a really good example about explainability, and let me give you for the audience. Let's use an extreme example. Let's say you had a machine learning or an AI model that was really good at adjudicating law. So instead of having a judge or a jury, you would have an ML engine that would essentially decide guilty, innocent in
Mm-hmm.
some case, right? Now that seems pretty radical. Now
Right.
imagine you had a verdict, guilty or not guilty, but you had no explainability, which is often the case with models, like
Mm-hmm.
especially neural networks, long-term, short-term memory networks. These are deep neural nets. They don't have a lot of explainability tools.
Right.
Do you trust if the algorithm? So obviously, if the answer from the machine is obvious, everyone kind of trusts it. If the answer becomes non-intuitive, how do you have a proof point that says that was the right decision? That's one of the, I think you really touched on it there. Unless we solve for explainability, no one's ever going to trust machines to make
Yeah.
hard decisions.
Yeah. Do you have an idea of how we would do that? Because right now, the more I think about it, that's the issue with the government really adapting AI completely, right? Especially some of those mission critical agencies, right? You're sitting there, you're looking at these government agencies, and they're like, why would I trust this machine, right, to give me the answer out there in the field in war, you know?
Yeah. So that's a great point. And it's why I like using multiple models to kind of correlate to a
Mhm.
solution. And I like to use and I like to use specific types of models like multifaceted decision trees, like random forest. I use this thing called XGBoost or gradient boosting machine, which I really like. Why? Because you can run it in a mode that it'll actually visualize a decision tree for you, right? So a gradient boosting machine creates a bunch of decision trees and then takes the average of those trees as the result. So as a data scientist, I can create a visualization of that data, of decision tree, and then actually walk through feature importance. So most good models these days will tell you, I based my decision mostly on these 3 or 4 input features. And
Mm-hmm.
then you as a data scientist can step back, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? Or this decision tree intuitively makes sense. I can explain it to my upstream consumer, which may be a business user or another data scientist. So so whenever I get to that kind of stage where I have to explain to the business why a model is doing a certain thing, I like to use these kind of tree-based visualizations. That's one approach.
No, that's a great approach right there. And I believe that I'm sure multiple data science implemented something like that, because I know for me, using different approaches actually makes them feel comfortable on the other end, right? From the customer standpoint, um, it's still they're probably still questioning a lot more, still, but it does make you feel more comfortable, when you're able to give multiple maybe models, right? Is that what you're referring
Yeah,
to? Multiple models?
yeah, multiple models. And look, you need to do these days. You need to do what's called a grid search anyway, which is kind of
Yeah.
iterate over all your hyperparameters, and you're usually iterating over multiple model types,
Hmm.
and you're comparing results. Like I just did an interview with a data scientist last week, and we took a Kaggle data set, and then we got on one model we got like a 75% accuracy on a balanced data set, and then on another model we were able to get something closer to 85. Right? It's good to see results from different techniques and different hyperparameters.
Right, right, right. Ultimately, I mean, what Andrew Yang was saying, even if you have, to get it more accurate, right? We say we go back to the model. A lot of developers will go back to the model. The data scientists will go back to the model, but ultimately, you could clean up the data set, right, to have better accuracy, if you will. So I mean, hey, look, man, there's so many different approaches out there, right? What would you say? I mean, this is completely it might go over some of the novice folks' heads, the beginners' head within the Dapper Data audience. But what would be a good accuracy, count for you? If you were to say, is you have 75%, 80 something percent, 90%. I mean, of course, 90 something percent is amazing, right? But if you were a customer on your end, I mean, you're not the person, the data scientist going out there doing the development. What would you accept as a good range for accuracy? Or would you say, hey, look, go back and do this to give me this better range?
It all depends on the balance of the data set. So if I've got a data set with a tiny number of true positives, so for example, we're screening for cancer patients, right?
Mm-hmm.
99% of cases or images that come across the model are false. There's no cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have a model that just says false all the time and you would be 99% accurate, but that
Right.
1% will kill people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we don't use accuracy exclusively
Mm-hmm.
in data science. We use more complicated metrics like an F1 score, where we look at precision and recall, and so we look at the balance between those metrics to see uh, what. So we have very sophisticated tools these days, something called an ROC, or a receiver operator curve, that'll help us balance precision and recall. And for folks, you can Google these two terms; they're fairly common terms, and get to an accuracy that makes sense relative to what's more important to you. Are false positives deadly in your case, or true positives more important? Would you rather err on the side of a false positive versus a false negative? And that's where I would focus on accuracy, not just the raw accuracy number, unless the data set's fully balanced, and then you can look at raw accuracy.
No, that's awesome. I mean, most of the time, yeah, and this brings me to education, right? The most educated people on the other end, even though they may not be data scientists, they cannot, I guess the right word is, be pushed over, or taken advantage of, right? A customer that educates themselves on more than just the accuracy, like you mentioned, right? And other things, or just educating themselves in general, when they're getting the feedback from somebody that is a data scientist, because there's a lot of, I've noticed, I've been working with a lot of people working for NetApp right now, and a lot of partners that we have come across, they're small. They might be startups, right? Whatever it is, because NetApp, they're more of a data management platform than anything, right? They're not. They have to partner with somebody that does something like Cast.ai, right? Or another company that actually is doing something data science related. And when I look at, um, you're able to the vetting that I've seen a lot of frauds out there.
Oh,
People
100%.
it's more than I ever thought or imagined since I have been with NetApp, partnering with people, and they're just like, they could fake it very well, right? Until they have to really show up,
Yeah.
and it's been hard out there.
And Bobby, that's what I found when hiring data scientists. I just can't do a standard interview process. We've moved 100% of these to live coding, where got like the person, it's a Zoom or physically in office, and we're coding something together. And look, you may not have all the answers. You may not be able to like know all the syntax off the back of your head, but you should know where to find it. Like you should
Mhm.
know how to use Google to effectively answer the questions that will quickly get you to the code that you need. So live coding for me has become 100% essential. Like we just can't hire people unless they show us the goods, so to speak. To your point about
Yeah.
fraud.
No, absolutely, absolutely, right. So look, I'm not going to hold you any longer. I appreciate you being on the podcast, Leon. I like to end usually, as my audience knows, with what I call a dope nugget or gem, just a summarization. And what I've taken from our conversation is that coding is important, right? For me, I really enjoy coding myself, and I've been trying to educate my kids on it. Other people as well. You don't have to be a data scientist, you don't have to be a programmer, whatever it is. And this is one thing I took from it, but coding helps you think outside the box. Coding helps you get through some of those tough problems. I think in life in general, it helps you automate some of the things that are manual in your life that you just that's a pain in the ass, right? But if you're somebody that is on the verge of actually becoming a data scientist, or somebody that is in the space that we live in, try those Kaggle competitions, right? Just jump out there. You don't have to win it, right? You could be in last place, but you'll learn so much more. Learn to code, and like you just said, you may not have the answers to all of the problems, right? Where you want to interview. I actually recommend to interview, just keep interviewing with some of the people like Cast.ai, because you guys give the hard problems, right? You actually help them challenge themselves. And if they don't know the answer, and they don't make the interview process and actually get the job, it's okay. You've learned so much, through the process. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I just want to touch on that topic that you mentioned. I was listening to this thing called the All In Summit, which is these four ultra rich investor dudes that are getting like a lot of acclaim. But someone in the audience asked a question, and I really like the answers. The audience said, "Look, I'm not a technical person. I'm in finance. What would you recommend in this tech space?" And
Mhm.
the answer that came back was super cool. It was, "You're not technical yet," is the way. Anybody can do this. They can train themselves at some level to use technology to their advantage. There's no reason. There's no barrier to entry, and there's no excuse not to learn if you want to learn. Like all the material. It's not like 20 years ago where you need to get a hold of a book. Right?
Mhm.
Everything is available for you. Just go learn it. Just pick it up and do it. Um, in terms of last minute thoughts, should we call out the couple of events that we've got going on, Bobby?
We can. I mean, you can definitely list those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, sure. So we've got AWS Summit coming up in Toronto at the end of June. So we're going to be showing some of our cloud optimization technologies. If you're on the East Coast or in the Toronto area, please check it out. And the other thing I wanted to mention is we're obviously hiring, as we talked about earlier before, Bobby, but we have a special connection to Ukraine. I'm actually Ukrainian by birth, so is my CEO and partner, Yuri. So we feel like we have to give back to that community. We've been fortunate enough to, we were both Soviet refugees when we left the country. We need to get something back. So we're offering folks that pass our interview loop the opportunity to come work with us, obviously, whenever they become available. If they're still fighting, that's cool. Like, whenever you're free, come, and we will pay for the first 3 months of housing and all of the immigration paperwork to make sure that you can get out and have a legitimate place, either in Western Europe or here in North America. So just wanted to announce that. And yeah, you can find all the details on our jobs page, which Bobby's put up.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. And you know, I really appreciate you coming on to the podcast because you definitely shed light on multiple topics, right? You know, this was a really fun podcast that I had, and the audience knows that I like to end with a game called Overrated, Underrated. Okay, and I got this game from a motivational speaker that I follow called Gary Vee. And basically, I'm going to ask you a series. I'm actually not going to ask you questions, but I'm going to throw out a series of topics, right? You know, you get to decide what is overrated, underrated, or right where it needs to be, right? So I could throw out cheese or the zoo or whatever it is, right? And it lets the audience know that we're normal, right? You know, we're not all techie all the time, right? We do think about stuff, right, that is outside the technology. And so, are you ready?
I, I think so, Bobby. I think
Okay.
I'm ready. Let's do this.
All right, okay. The printer.
Underrated.
Oh, you're like the you're. I've said it probably about 3 times out of all 100 and something or so, about 200 podcasts, and you are the first person that's ever said underrated.
Is there nothing like a piece of paper in your hand? Like, come on, like when you're on an airplane and you need to read something, that piece of paper is like super valuable if there's no Wi-Fi.
No, that's true. No, absolutely, because the airplane definitely will go out of Wi-Fi. If anybody's never experienced it, you know, it is probably the worst experience you can have. And the flight is longer than, you know, an hour, right? You're sitting there and you want to read something, right? You don't have your book, right? You don't have your laptop available because you didn't download the article, right? Or something, you know, ahead of time. But I can see that, you know, I personally say overrated. I mean, I I don't. I have a printer, and I get upset every time somebody makes me use it. You know,
There,
every time, man. And I'm just like, look, I can tiny scan on my phone, or I can, you know, do whatever. You know, it's always the ability to do something that does not involve a printer. But why do they force me to do this printer thing, man?
yeah, no, I see your point, but I think if you're in the driver's seat and you want something on paper, it's like it's it's super cool that we can still do that. Right?
Right. All right, next one. Wait, you currently live in Canada?
Yes, Toronto.
Okay, Toronto, Canada. Okay. But you are from Ukraine.
Yeah, so I was an immigrant from Ukraine to we immigrated to Canada, and then I spent the last kind of 15 years in Los Angeles. Recently moved back during COVID.
Okay. All right. Next, um, the Titanic movie.
I underrated.
Hmm. I agree. I agree.
I love a good I love a good inspirational love scene, Bobby. So
Yeah.
I'm also a sucker for musicals, which my wife laughs at me all the time. So maybe I'm not a great person for this question.
Ah. No. It was a great movie, you know, and it's funny because I remember I was talking to my brother about this, and he said that um, it's really the song that makes the movie. He feels like,
Yeah,
you know.
Celine Dion has a
Yeah.
magical voice.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Next, tacos.
Overrated.
That was a quick answer there, Leon.
I'm not a fan of the taco.
Have you been taco overloaded, man? Has
I
the wife
have.
cooked
I,
too many tacos?
well, I think when you live in Southern California, there's tacos everywhere. It's just
Oh, it is.
it's in your face. You can't avoid. tacos, burritos, tacos. And there's some good ones. And there's some really authentic places.
Oh man, yeah. All right, so I don't know if you've seen this or not, but the Northern Lights.
Underrated,
Underrated?
underrated.
Man. Okay, I can't wait. I'm going to have to definitely check it out.
Like if you haven't actually witnessed it in person, it's just like a crazy out of body experience. Like you just have to see it.
Oh man. Okay, okay, okay. All right. All right. Brunch.
Just where it needs to be.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's always room for brunch, Bobby.
I like brunch
Nice.
and scotch, man. Just as long as scotch is there for me, I'm
That's an interesting combination, right? I'm
yeah,
I'm personally a fan of the mimosa, but
yeah,
Scotch I think works.
yeah, definitely. All right, last one. Libraries.
Overrated.
Ah, I agree. I agree.
I hate libraries because of the curmudgeon like lady that just tells you to shut up all the time. And like she's like I just have a horrible life, like just the memory of the library. It didn't represent knowledge to me. It just represent like a jail. Like, oh, let's go to the library, detention.
Um, I haven't been to a library since I don't know when I was like a little kid. I don't really feel a need for me to do it. Some people I ask and they say, hey, look, you have to go to the library. Because it's a time to get some peace to yourself and all that good stuff. So,
Yeah, but actually, what people don't know is in real libraries where they have a lot of books, they have to lower the oxygen level in those rooms so that they can keep the books healthy, right? Because otherwise, and so that lack of oxygen actually makes you sleepy. That's why everyone's sleeping in the library.
oh, oh crap! I did not know that.
I used to study at the York University Library all the time. It was terrible. No oxygen.
You are always asleep, huh?
Yeah.
All right, the last one. I know I said last one, but one more. I do not know how to pronounce it, but I'm gonna post it, okay? And I'm only posting this because this is supposed to be something that is a Ukrainian dish that is known. Have you tasted it before? And is that all it's hyped up to be?
Are you kidding? I grew up on this stuff. It's pronounced borscht, and
Borscht.
and
Okay.
there's two different ones. So
Uh-huh.
there's a red one and a green one.
Hmm.
The green one is cold. The red one is hot. The
Okay.
green one is disgusting. Like nobody would ever have cold borscht. The red one is delicious because it
Hmm.
comes like it's potatoes and beets and carrots and cabbage, and it's floating like pieces of beef. And then the way you're supposed to eat it is you're supposed to take a piece of French bread and a
Hmm.
piece of garlic, and what you do is you salt the rim of the French bread, and then you use the garlic and you rub it on the bread, and you eat the borscht with the garlicky bread.
Uh-huh.
Unbelievable. If you haven't tried it, next time we're together, I will treat you to some authentic borscht.
Thank you, thank you. And I'm going to try to find some in the Maryland, D.C. area. I'm sure they have some restaurants that definitely sell it there.
100%.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Leon. I appreciate you. And audience, thank you for being able to listen to the Data is My Science podcast, the show that makes data your passion. I'm your host, Dapper Data. And this has been an amazing experience. Thank you for sharing with us all your knowledge, Leon. And audience, definitely check out Cast.ai/jobs, as Leon mentioned before. And also check out the summits out there and the AWS summits in Toronto. And I don't know if you mentioned, are you all speaking at it or you're having a booth or anything like that?
Yeah, I think we're presenting at the vendor showcase.
Nice, 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 nice. So definitely check Leon out there and cast that AI. And audience, as you know, you can follow me on at Mr. Dapper Data on any one of my social media platforms. And I love you all. Peace.